Get ready for a spectacle unlike any other, folks. A graphic flashes on screen announcing the main event. Little Mr. T is gunning for the gold in a midget wrestling extravaganza. This is Vern Gagney's bold attempt to capitalize on the rock wrestling craze, but we're left wondering how he expected to strike gold with this unorthodox approach. As we cut to the crowd, we're treated to a stylish spectator sporting a fetching Argyle sweater and a crisp collar. She's clearly dressed to impress. But the real showstopper is Mini Mr. T, strutting down to the ring with his flashy gold, chains, intimidating mohawk, and hoop earring. Let's be real, this guy is downright terrifying. I'd be shaking in my boots if I crossed paths with him in a dark alley. One accidental elbow bump and I'm convinced he'd unleash a flurry of attacks targeting my vulnerable lower body. It's a 45-minute time limit for the American Wrestling Association Midget Championship, and I'm on the edge of my seat wondering how this wild ride will play out. In the heart of Tokyo, a legendary champion emerges, clad in traditional wooden sandals that seem to echo the ancient streets of his hometown. Little Tokyo, a grizzled veteran of the AWF, steps into the ring, his eyes fixed on the prize. I find myself wondering if he claimed the AWA title from the formidable Little Yokozuna, a feat that would cement his status as a wrestling icon. As the bell rings, the two opponents collide, their bodies crashing against the ropes like waves against the ropes like waves against the shore. A thunderous right hand connects, sending shockwaves through the arena. Suddenly, a diminutive figure bursts onto the scene, clad in Rambo-inspired fatigues. None other than Little Mr. T. With a burst of energy, he scampers over to Tokyo, using the ropes to launch himself into a daring slingshot maneuver. I'm left scratching my head, trying to fathom what Vern Gagney, the mastermind behind this spectacle, was thinking. Was this supposed to be a comedic masterpiece? Because honestly, it comes across as a cringeworthy attempt at humor. Mr. T, usually a force to be reckoned with, is reduced to a caricature, his usual intensity and charisma lost in a sea of absurdity. This bizarre display only serves to undermine the legitimacy of the match, leaving me bewildered and underwhelmed. When Vince McMahon brought in Mr. T, he sparked a firestorm of controversy. The wrestling establishment was up in arms, not just because of T's celebrity status, but also because of how quickly he was positioned as a legitimate challenger to seasoned pros like Piper and Orton. It was a slap in the face to the old guard who had spent years honing their craft and building their reputations as ruthless heels. The notion that a TV personality could waltz in and instantly be taken seriously as a threat to these veterans was seen as a threat to the very fabric of the business. This was the era of old school promoters who believed that celebrities had no place in the wrestling ring, and that allowing them to compete alongside seasoned wrestlers would undermine the integrity of the sport. But Superclash 85, which took place just months after WrestleMania, proved to be a game changer. The success of that event showed that bringing in outside talent could be a lucrative move, and it left promoters like Vern Gagney seething. They saw it as a sellout, a betrayal of the business they had dedicated their lives to. The debate would rage on, but one thing was clear. The landscape of professional wrestling was changing, and there was no going back. Tokyo seizes the opportunity, cinching an aside headlock and unleashing a flurry of chops that leave the crowd wincing. A swift snapmare later, and Tokyo has Mr. T locked in a sleeper hold, but the A-Team star refuses to tap out. Mr. T counters with a vicious hammerlock, only to be sent crashing to the mat as Tokyo bursts free from the hold. The crowd erupts in laughter as Tokyo takes a page from Ric Flair's playbook, executing a dramatic flop that has the audience in stitches. Despite the comedic moment, Tokyo proves himself to be a skilled and charismatic performer, expertly working the crowd into a frenzy. Mr. T, however, is far from defeated. He mounts a comeback, shrugging off a series of blows before delivering a thunderous right hand that sends Little Tokyo stumbling into the turnbuckle. The crowd gasps as Mr. T follows up with a brutal headbutt, but Tokyo somehow kicks out of the ensuing pin at the last second. As Mr. T struts around the ring, his signature swagger on full display, it's impossible not to draw comparisons to his iconic TV persona. One thing's for sure, you'd have to be a fool to miss the parallels between Mr. T's ring persona and his legendary character from the A-Team. Little Mr. T unleashes a bizarre arm drag, defying gravity as he springs into the air, teasing a crossbody block before suddenly yanking his opponent's arm across his body. It's a move that suggests he's been schooled in the art of unconventional grappling. Meanwhile, Little Tokyo retaliates with a vicious eye rake, prompting Larry Nelson to claim that he attempted to rip his nose clean off. But listen to Nelson's commentary tonight, and you'll notice he's fixated on the facial brutality of it all. A phrase that's equal parts cringe, worthy, and hilarious. The clock has ticked away 5 minutes, and Little Tokyo has seized the opportunity to take control, cinching in a front headlock and slamming Mr. TT to the mat with a suplex. The referee's count barely reaches 2 before Mr. T kicks out, and he retaliates with a series of rapid-fire snapmares and a suffocating chinlock. Unfortunately, this bout has devolved into a farce, with both competitors struggling to find their rhythm. It's as if they're trapped in a never-ending nightmare, forced to endure the agony of a 7-minute and counting slog. Little Tokyo resorts to desperation, yanking Mr. T's hair to break free from the hold. The action briefly picks up as Tokyo unleashes a flurry of stomps, backdrops, and rope-assisted throws. But just as it seems like Mr. T is about to gain some momentum, he inexplicably freezes in his tracks, his gaze fixed on the sky. Little Tokyo, perplexed, looks up to follow his opponent's gaze, only to be met with a pair of swift punches to the face. Mr. T repeats the bizarre sequence, leaving both men and the audience bewildered. What's the punchline here? Are they gazing at something hilarious that I'm missing? Is the American Wrestling Association imploding before our very eyes? Next, Tokyo attempts to pull off the same trick, but Mr. has already seen through the ruse. He's not buying what Tokyo's selling, and he's not about to get duped into looking up at nothing. With a swift takedown, Mr. T sends Tokyo crashing to the ground, leaving him to wonder what just hit him. In a bizarre display of brutality, Mr. T unleashes a vicious stomp on Tokyo's unprotected feet, serving as a harsh reminder to all grapplers: never step into the ring sans shoes. Tokyo retaliates by attempting to crush Mr. T's hands, but misses the mark, leaving himself open to another merciless foot stomp. The crowd is in stitches as this absurdity unfolds. At Super Clash, Tokyo tries to regain control with a headlock takeover, but Mr. counters with a series of aggressive headbutts punctuated by a strange, strutting dance movie. The action devolves further as Mr. T's attempted bump attack backfires, sending him tumbling to the mat. Tokyo seizes the opportunity, launching Mr. T into the air with a thunderous backdrop, accompanied by a primal roar that sends shivers down the spine. A swift Irish whip sets up a devastating throat drop, and Tokyo seals the deal with a decisive 3 count, retaining his NWA World Midget Championship. The audience is left wincing in sympathetic pain, wondering how these two competitors managed to survive such a grueling, cringe-worthy encounter. As the iconic anthem, "Let's Hear It for the Boy," blares through the speakers, little Mr. T makes his grand entrance, leaving no doubt that this pint-sized powerhouse is ready to rumble. But hold up, folks. This ain't no Haiti Kid, the legendary wrestler who wouldn't dare sacrifice his luscious locks until 1986 in a notorious Piper's Pit segment. Little Mr. T, on the other hand, looks like he's been through the ringer, his weathered face telling a tale of hard knocks and rough living. What's striking about this match is its uncharacteristic seriousness. Midget matches are usually played for comedic effect, but not this one. Instead, I found myself taking note of the following peculiarities as the bout unfolded. The tough skull trope is in full effect, with little Mr. T's cranium seemingly made of granite. A brief crowd shot reveals a mass exodus to the concession stand. Perhaps the audience was craving some excitement to match the on-screen action. Midgets employing rest holds is a recipe for tedium, especially when you're expecting high-flying acrobatics. It's a reminder that back in the day, these little warriors were the original cruiserweights. Larry Nelson's commentary is peppered with enthusiastic declarations of anything can happen. A phrase that starts to feel like a mantra by the match's midpoint. A scan of the card reveals that Little Tokyo is one of only 3 competitors on this show who would go on to appear at the iconic WrestleMania 3. The action becomes so underwhelming that the camera crew decides to cut away and showcase a majestic full moon hanging low in the sky, a subtle hint that the real main event is happening outside the ring. It's a familiar pattern. Every so often, they dust off the title and slap it on someone just to justify a lackluster match. These impromptu championship bouts rarely impressed, often accompanied by cringe-worthy attempts at humor. This particular match was a prime example of the problem. A hollow exercise in title, holding with no narrative drive. With 13 matches spread across a bloated 3-hour runtime, you'd think there'd be at least one standout performance, but it seems like the focus was on quantity over quality, cramming as much content as possible into the show without putting in the effort to make it true.